Hi everyone. In this video, we will be discussing one of the greatest play of all times, that is She Stoops to Conquer by Oliver Goldsmith. So if you look at the previous year questions, we can find multiple questions asked from She Stoops to Conquer, and even from a literary point of view, this work has got its own relevance. So about She Stoops to Conquer and Oliver Goldsmith. So She Stoops to Conquer, it's a comedic play written by Oliver Goldsmith. It was first performed in 1773 at Covent Garden Theatre in London. And the play is a satire of the manners and customs of 18th century English society, particularly focusing on the theme of social class and the complexities of courtship. So if you look at the plays of that time, you can find that the comedy of manners was actually a very prominent theme. For example, if you look at The Way of the World by William Congreve, we can find The Way of the World was first published in 1700. So you can find a 70-year gap between Way of the World and She Stoops to Conquer. So if you look at this play, Way of the World, you can find that the people were actually accepting the class differences and people were marrying within these class frames and all. So you can also find the satire of the manners of the middle class people. But when it comes to 1773, when there was a bit of the next age is romantic age, where people gave more importance to individualism and imagination, you can find that people started to slowly forget the class differences, and people started to mingle with each other between the different classes. But at the same time, you can also find that ultimately all these people belong to the same class. So She Stoops to Conquer, it's a comedic play written by Oliver Goldsmith, which is a satire of the manners and customs of the 18th century English society, especially the theme of social class and the complexities of courtship. Because during that time, marriage was not something that was easy. Okay, marriage was something where your parents arrange a girl for you or arrange a boy for you on the basis of the status. You have to meet him or her, and then you have to finally settle with her, even if you are not in love with her. So that is basically what happened with the courtship when it comes to the 18th century. So this is actually a satire on such manners and on the theme of the social class and the complexities of courtship. So, moving on, the play is considered as an example of the revival of laughing comedy over the sentimental comedy. So, we know that before Restoration age, and that means from the Civil War to Restoration age, the theatres were banned. None of the theatres were there, and then there was an importance to this heroic tragedy. But at the same time, the most prominent play was always this comedy. And even though we never returned back to the glorifying time of this Elizabethan age, you can find many prominent comedies of that time, including this Way of World, from Way of the World, like She Stoops to Conquer. During this Enlightenment age and Restoration age, you can find many important comedies. So one thing is that at first this comedy started as comedy of manners, then it moved to sentimental comedy, and then this She Stoops to Conquer is considered as an example of laughing comedy. And at that time, one of the prominent comedies that were there was the sentimental comedy. So it was actually a revival of laughing comedy over the popular trend of sentimental comedy. And the play might also be seen as a comedy of manners. So comedy of manners is comedy of manners in the sense the comedy arises from the gap between the standards of behavior the characters regard as proper in polite society. So where you act as another person, or where you where you move away from all these norms and conditions or how to act. So that is where the comedy of manners arrives. So when we take She Stoops to Conquer, She Stoops to Conquer falls under two categories. One is laughing comedy and the other one is comedy of manners. And you also have to understand what comedy of manners is. In comedy of manners, the comedy arises from the gap between the standards of behavior the characters regard as proper in polite society. So speaking about the author, about Oliver Goldsmith. Oliver Goldsmith, he was born in the year 1730 and died in the year 1774. He was an Irish playwright, novelist and poet. That is one thing that you have to remember, because you can expect questions like who among the following is an Irish writer, who among the following is an English writer. Then you can expect Oliver Goldsmith. I think there was once a question like that. So he was a prominent figure in the literary circles of his time, known for his wit and humor. Goldsmith's other notable works include The Vicar of Wakefield and the poem The Deserted Village. And for the NET exam, we have questions from both The Vicar of Wakefield and The Deserted Village. Okay, so She Stoops to Conquer, The Deserted Village, The Vicar of Wakefield, Goldsmith's every work is important from a NET point of view. You can expect questions from any of these three works of Oliver Goldsmith. So the play She Stoops to Conquer, the novel The Vicar of Wakefield, and the poem The Deserted Village. And you have to remember the minute details of this work. For example, I think it was in June 2023, there was a question regarding the title of The Deserted Village, whether it was The Deserted Village or A Deserted Village or The Deserted Villa. So the very minute details are also important when it comes to Oliver Goldsmith. So that's about Oliver Goldsmith. Remember his important works and its features. So coming back to this work, this She Stoops to Conquer, it's actually the significance of She Stoops to Conquer is that it is one of the greatest comedies in English literature, because by this time, because before this decade or before this century, people believe that tragedy was considered to be the elite form of a drama, or to be the classical form of a drama. But when it comes to this English literature, when it comes to this Restoration Age and Enlightenment Age, comedy started to get an importance. So more than this Enlightenment Age, it was in Restoration Age that the comedies got its significance, because after a deep, chaotic, sad and tragic civil war and this Puritan age, people wanted to have celebrations, and with this merry king who is Charles II, people started to celebrate this writing, and that is how this comedies became one of the major genre. So it marks a departure from the sentimental comedy popular at the time, instead embracing farce and satire. So sentimental comedy was one popular genre of comedies during that time, and the significance of She Stoops to Conquer is that She Stoops to Conquer succeeded in changing the shift from sentimental comedy to comedy of manners or laughing comedy, where the importance is more on farce and satire. So the play's enduring popularity and influence have secured its place as a classic of English theatre, showcasing Goldsmith's skill in blending humor with social commentary. So if you have ever read She Stoops to Conquer, you will get an idea about how he views the society, the class differences, and you can consider the She Stoops to Conquer as a social commentary and also has a slapstick humor. Okay, so that is the significance of She Stoops to Conquer. And if we look at the plot of She Stoops to Conquer, this is the plot in brief. So the story is about young Charles Marlowe. So this young Charles Marlowe and his friend George Hastings both are invited to visit a country estate of Mr. Hardcastle, and they are invited to visit the castle by Charles' father because both Charles' father and Mr. Hardcastle wanted their children to marry each other. That is, Charles' father wanted Charles to marry Hardcastle's daughter Kate. So that is the purpose of this invitation. So upon arriving at the Hardcastle's home, Marlowe and Hastings mistakes the house for an inn due to a practical joke played by Tony Lumpkin, Mrs. Hardcastle's son. So here you can find Mr. Hardcastle, he's married to Mrs. Hardcastle, and Mrs. Hardcastle has a son prior to Hardcastle, that is Tony Lumpkin, and this Tony Lumpkin makes a prank on them, and these two people, that is Charles and George Hastings, they believe the house of Mr. Hardcastle to be an inn. So if we go to our father's friend's house, we will be all humble, we will be all respectful, but when it is an inn, we will start to demand things because that is our right to get these things because we are paying for it. So you can find Charles and George are extremely rude to Mr. Hardcastle, thinking him to be an innkeeper. So Marlowe, who is shy and awkward around women of his own class, is more at ease with lower class women. So the thing is that Marlowe is actually a very introverted person. He's a very shy person and he does not feel comfortable with women of his own class, and he finds more comfortable with women of lower class because they often consider him to be mighty. He can mingle easily with him. He doesn't have to follow any protocols or he doesn't have to follow any social standards. So it was really easy for him to mingle with the lower class women than the class women of his own class. So the thing is that he has this prejudice towards every woman of his own class that they are extremely sophisticated and they are not fun loving. So here that is where Charles meet Kate, and Kate, she wanted to win Marlowe's affection and she pretended to be a barmaid named Kate Hardcastle. So she pretends to be a barmaid, that is that is where the title She Stoops to Conquer. So in order to win the love of Charles, she stoops to a lower level so that she could win him easily. So Kate's impersonation of a barmaid leads to a comedic misunderstandings as Marlowe becomes smitten with her, believing her to be a common servant while treating Kate herself with disdain. So here you can find that when this Kate acts as a barmaid, Charles easily falls with her. He feels attracted to her, but he doesn't have any feelings for the real Kate, that is Mr. Hardcastle's daughter. So meanwhile, Hastings is in love with Constance Neville. So this Hastings, who was a companion to Charles, he falls in love with a character called Constance. So Constance is actually the niece of Mrs. Hardcastle. She lives with the Hardcastles, but is being forced into an arranged marriage with Tony Lumpkin because of her money. And as the play progresses, various characters become entangled in the deceptions, leading to humorous situations. And finally, you can find everything everything ends happily. All the misunderstandings are cleared up and the true identities of the characters are revealed. So one thing that you have to remember here is the character of Tony Lumpkin. This is regarded to be one of the best characters in English literature. So he is the one who makes all the misunderstandings, and that too just for fun. And here you can also find that he never wanted to marry this Constance Neville. He is not at all bothered about the money she has. He just wants to have a very fun life. So here Marlowe discovers that Kate Hardcastle is actually the woman of higher social standing he was meant to court, and he happily accepts her because nothing is going to change her. He can maintain his social status. At the same time, he also gets to marry a person who he can vibe with. And Constance and Hastings also overcome their obstacles to be together. So overall, She Stoops to Conquer is a comedy of errors filled with mistaken identities, humorous situations, and a celebration of love conquering social expectations. So now let's look at the major characters here. And the characters of She Stoops to Conquer, that's really significant because it's one of the excellent characterization in English literature. So the major characters are Charles Marlowe, who is a very young, bashful man of high social status, and he is supposed to marry Kate Hardcastle, who is a very clever and spirited young woman. She's the daughter of Mr. Hardcastle, and the most mischievous character in this play, that is Tony Lumpkin. So Tony Lumpkin is Kate's stepbrother, he's Mrs. Hardcastle's son, and then we have Mr. Hardcastle, a country gentleman, and Kate's father, Mrs. Hardcastle, and the only concern of Mrs. Hardcastle is to marry her son Tony Lumpkin to Constance Neville, and Constance Neville is a young lady in love with Hastings. So you can find the major themes here. So social class and status, deception and mistaken identity, love and courtship, freedom and independence, appearance versus reality, and satire of manners and customs. So the first theme is social class and status. So if you look at this social class and status, you can find that the play, it satirizes the manners. It satirizes the manners and the social conventions followed by these middle class people or the upper middle class people during that time, especially the absurdities of these class distinctions. Because if you consider the case of Marlowe or Charles, he has a prejudice that the lower class people are more fun while the middle class people are more sophisticated, they are more superficial. So that prejudices, he satirizes all these beliefs and convention. And then deception and mistaken identity, and almost all the humor in this play arises from the misunderstanding or this mistaken identity, where characters pretend to be someone that they are not, or the characters without understanding who they really are make some judgmental comments or judgmental remarks, which actually bring that this is the part that actually brings the humor to this play. And then we can find love and courtship. So love and courtship is another thing, and here you can find there are various attitude towards love. Okay, Charles' attitude towards love is not something that is followed by Hastings. Kate's attitude towards love is different. Tony's attitude towards this is different. The parents' attitude towards their children's marriage is different. So you can find the different attitudes of love or different perceptions of love through these different characters. Then freedom and independence. So here that is another major thing here. For example, Tony Lumpkin is a character who completely wants to embrace both these concepts, that is freedom and independence in his life. He never wants to marry the person his mother wants. He never wants to have anything restricted to him. He wants everything to be fun. He wants the freedom to have this fun and independence. Similarly, Charles wanted to marry a person of a lower status because he can easily engage with her, but at the same time he doesn't have the freedom to speak to his father about this openly. So you can find how these social conventions or social constraints restricts this freedom and independence for different characters. Then appearance versus reality, and finally you can find the theme satire of manners and customs. That is also one major theme. So here these are the basic things that you have to remember, or the general facts that you have to remember about She Stoops to Conquer. Now let's look at the question that was asked in December 2023. Which of the following characteristics of She Stoops to Conquer is not correct? Which of the following characteristics of She Stoops to Conquer is not correct? You have to identify the incorrect statement. It is endowed with an ingenious and lively plot. It's actually a correct statement. It is more, you can find more happening in this play. It does not cast excellent characters. That is an incorrect statement, because each of the character in the sense Tony Lumpkin, Mr. Hardcastle, Mrs. Hardcastle, Constance, Hastings, Charles, each of these characters has got their own uniqueness and their own identity. So the characterization of She Stoops to Conquer is really excellent. So that is the incorrect statement. Then it has a vivacious and delightful style. That's also correct. It lacks the restoration grossness. That is also a correct statement. So the incorrect statement is it does not cast excellent characters. So the correct answer is option B, because She Stoops to Conquer, it is actually known for its well-crafted characters or renowned characters. Even if you look at each characters, Kate Hardcastle or Tony Lumpkin, especially Tony Lumpkin is considered to be one of the greatest mischievous character ever made. So that's all about She Stoops to Conquer. So remember, She Stoops to Conquer, written by Oliver Goldsmith. All other works of Oliver Goldsmith are equally important, especially The Deserted Village and The Vigor of the Wakefield. And you also have to remember the very general facts regarding She Stoops to Conquer. When it was first performed, the major characters, what happens to them, and the themes. So that's all about this video. Thank you.